What's up, everyone? This is the Next Tape Podcast, episode 36, with Mikel and
Tanyka.
where we have conversations on different topics. So today, Tanyka, we'll be talking about something that's basically really dark that
Yeah.
that crowds around this world today.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
We're going to be talking about cults.
Yeah.
And yes, cults can be dark. Not every cult ends in like death, as some of the more mainstream, quote unquote, ones tend to be.
Most of them are. I think most of them,
Not all of them, no.
Really?
Mm-mm.
Huh.
No, not all of them.
Interesting.
I would say especially the ones that are more in this time that we're currently in. A lot of them are not. A lot of them have been dubbed sex cults, or we have twin flames going on right now.
Right.
That's not, cult doesn't necessarily mean someone's going to die or the cult members themselves are going to die. I think it all just depends.
Yeah, some of them are like religion as well, and
religion-based one. Yeah. Even the ones that are the sex cult ones too can still revolve around religion to some extent.
Right.
Even some religions have been cults in the past and are no longer like Seventh-day Adventists. Started as a cult. So
would you say some schools are cults too?
If it's like a school that's inside of an already developed cult, then maybe. But I wouldn't necessarily say the school itself.
Yeah.
I think, again, it just depends on the situation.
Right. Okay.
But, yeah, this is what we're going to be talking about.
Let's dive in.
Basically, how we're going to do this is kind of talk about some of those old school cults. And then we'll kind of do a couple that are more recent. Can't remember if I talk about Twin Flames in this. I might have done these notes pre-Twin Flame, before my knowledge of Twin Flames, but we can quickly talk about that. Just because of this is still a pretty active cult that's currently not breaking any laws, technically. But anyways, let's start in the beginning. So I think a lot of us have heard of Jonestown. Mikel, have you heard of Jonestown?
No. I haven't heard anything about I heard about Georgetown, but
not I Georgetown, haven't heard Jonestown.
Oh, Jonestown. Never heard of it. Never heard of it.
Have you heard of the term people say, don't drink the Kool-Aid?
Don't drink Kool-Aid.
Have you ever heard that before?
I heard that term, yeah.
Okay, well, you're about to understand where that came from. So, Jonestown, which is kind of started around 1978, was a location, well, Jonestown, it's very complicated, but Jonestown itself was established on November 18th, 1978, but technically the cult predates that. So this was the location of the mass murder-suicide of members of the California-based People's Temple cult at the behest of their, I hate to call him charismatic, but anyways, and paranoid leader, Jim Jones, which is where Jonestown is named after. It's named after him.
I heard about the Jim Jones.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in Jonestown, which was located in Guyana. So we don't have to go into too much about that, but basically they took over Guyana, called it, I believe the actual place is called Jamestown or Georgetown, but he renamed it Jonestown anyways.
Right.
So the death toll of this murder-suicide was exceeded 900 people. It's one of the largest mass murders/suicides in American history, if I'm correct. So this included 300 people were under the age of 17, making the incident one of the largest, as I said, mass deaths in American history. So Jones opened his first church in the mid-1950s in Indianapolis. At the time, he was not affiliated with any particular denomination and had no theological training. His congregation was known for being radically integrated, which he kind of banked on that, honestly. So this was because it was particularly progressive at the time.
Right.
Jim Jones himself was white, but a lot of his cult followers were Black. In 1960, Jones's congregation, by then called the People's Temple, affiliated with the Disciples of Christ, and 4 years later, Jones was ordained in that church. In the mid-1960s, he and his wife incorporated the People's Temple in California and settled outside the town of Ukiah. I don't know if I said that right, but with some 100 followers, believing that the move would protect them in the event of nuclear holocaust. In 1970, Jones began holding services in San Francisco, and by 1972, he had opened another temple in Los Angeles. He began to make friends among politicians and the press in California and became a respected churchman. Thousands of followers, which I've mentioned already, a large percentage of them were Black, flocked to him. Central to Jones's appeal were his displays of mind reading and faith healing. So if you were to watch any documentary, there's a lot of film of his quote unquote like miracles.
Do you know why Black people basically flocked or followed
him?
Jones? Yeah, like, is it because of the religion, or is it because of like who he is as a?
I think it was the acceptance. I think it was the acceptance. I think because it was a time where Black people couldn't just walk into any place, even though this was in the 70s. He did start doing this in the 60s. So I think it had a lot to do with that and that sense of community. Right. And when you have other people who look like you following this white guy, it's like you have the sense of community. But like any other cult, they're giving away their money, their life savings. Yes. Anything going to them is going back into the church. So it's that's the biggest thing when it comes to cults. And when you're in, you feel like you have no way out. But I will kind of put a disclaimer at the end that I think, it's kind of my thoughts from all of the different things I've listened to, watched, and whatever, that I think is very important. So while the People's Temple was active in humanitarian causes in its communities, Jones's treatment of his followers was often less than humane. Temple members were regularly humiliated, beaten, blackmailed, and many were coerced or brainwashed into signing over their possessions, as I just mentioned, including their homes, to the church. Black members and members of other minority groups were convinced that if they left the People's Temple, they would be rounded up into government-run concentration camps. So there's also that. He's warping their thought process because no one's sending anyone to a concentration camp. Especially in the 70s. Like, that's not gonna happen. Unfortunately, it does happen. It's not that it doesn't happen, or it wasn't happening, but the likelihood of that happening is non-existent, I would think, especially in Los Angeles. But for whatever reason, he was able to, no, you're not safe. I keep you safe, So family members were kept apart and encouraged to inform on one another. So it's also that going on. In 1977, after members of the press began to ask questions about Jones's operation, he moved with several hundred of his followers to Jonestown, as mentioned, which was a compound that he had been building in Guyana for about 3 to 4 years. So a lot of the money he was collecting from his members was going into this. Because Go ahead. No, go ahead. You have a question. Go ahead.
You would think friends and family would be informed that their friends would be in something like this, like a cult like this, or
Oh, they know. They know. The problem is that they don't. Even though a family member might know, or a friend might know that someone, their loved one, is in a cult, they are the cult member is basically told to cut all contact with other people outside of the cults.
Right.
So there's no communication. Especially, it's hard now trying to break a family member or loved one out of a cult in this generation. Imagine how difficult it was back then. You didn't have cell phones.
Oh yeah.
You only have landlines, and you didn't have email. You didn't have any of these things. So you didn't have easy ways of getting in touch with your loved one. So once he moved these almost 1,000 people, including himself and his family, to this compound, it made contact with your family member that much harder. There were family members who did go to Jonestown to see their family members before this happened. But the intensity of getting that to happen, the allowance to get that allowance for that to happen, was difficult. So there was no easy way to get in touch with your family.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
So a cable from the U.S. Embassy in Guyana to the U.S. Department of State in June 1978 characterized the autonomy that Jones subsequently found in Guyana this way. He said, during the consular visits, it has been observed that the local Guyanese administration exercises little or no control over the Jonestown community, and that the settlement's autonomy seems virtually total. This is due to a variety of reasons, which include the fact that the area in question is remote, and thus the government's rather primitive administrative machinery is already overstrained by its obligations to the Guyanese citizens living in the region, as well as an understandable disinterest on the part of the local officials to bother with an apparently self-sufficient community of non-Guyanese who obviously are not actively seeking any extent of contact with the Guyanese environment in which their settlement is located. So they're kind of, in a sense, washing their hands of it. They're not our problem.
Okay.
So in November 1978, this is where the trouble starts. U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan traveled to Guyana to inspect the People's Temple's activities in the Jonestown compound. He was investigating rumors that some members of the cult were being held against their will and that some were being subjected to physical and psychological abuse. After traveling to Guyana's capital, Georgetown, on November 14th, he arrived at Jonestown on November 17th. The following day, when Ryan was set to return home, several temple members who wanted to leave the compound boarded his delegation's truck in order to escape. That was They wanted to leave, and they had
Wow.
no other way to leave. So they see, here's my way out, so I'm taking it. But here's the
Wow.
problem. Other members attacked Ryan shortly before the vehicle left the compound, but he escaped.
Mm.
He was unhurt at this point, and the truck continued on with Ryan aboard, along with the temple members who also escaped.
Right.
Temple members weren't trying to leave, then launched an attack at the airstrip from which Ryan and his company were to depart. 5 people, including Ryan, and 3 members of the press were shot and killed, and 11 others were wounded. So in the wake of the shooting, Jones released radio orders for temple members outside the compound to commit suicide. Now, what I'm going to tell you before we continue on with this is they would, so when you remember, like when we're in school, we have to do like drills, we do fire drills or potential shooter drills or stuff like that. We would do this.
We do a lot of those drills. Yeah, that's
in this cult. They would do suicide drills.
Really.
They did it at least.
Wow.
Yes, they did it at least 2 or 3 times before this happened. They would do drills.
So,
and it's recorded.
So like practice drills. So like they
would do practice. Out. They would do practice drills.
Yeah, that's evil.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And the thing that's also really heartbreaking for anyone who's watched a documentary of this, you can hear there is audio of the actual suicide happening. You can hear people crying, screaming. Yeah. So let's get into it. So shortly thereafter, Jones enacted his quote-unquote revolutionary suicide plan at the compound, which members, as I mentioned, had practiced in the past, in which a fruit drink was laced with cyanide, tranquilizers, and sedatives. Now, as I mentioned to you in the beginning, that don't drink the Kool-Aid reference comes from this. So there was a rumor that they were drinking Kool-Aid drinks, but they actually were drinking knockoff Kool-Aid drinks. But this is where that comes from. So it was just squirted into the mouths of babies and children via syringe, and then the adults. Yeah, so basically what they would do is they would feed the poison into syringes, feed it to the kids and the babies first, so that they would die first, and then the adults would then drink the poison themselves.
It's amazing how nobody saw no issue with this ritual.
No one did.
Wow.
It's and again, there are pictures out there. If you haven't seen the pictures, if you want to see them, I mean, I don't. It's not gruesome, but it's chilling. Is the best word I can use. It's chilling, seeing the bodies just everywhere, just like they're sleeping, just everywhere.
Oh.
It's sad.
Yeah, it is.
So with that in mind, what did Jones do? What did he do to kill himself? Well, he decided that he didn't want to die brutally by taking cyanide and tranquilizers. He instead shot himself. This coward shot himself because it would be easier and it would be faster and not painful.
That's insane.
Fucking guy. Anyways, that's what he did. So with this, fewer than 100 of the temple members in Guyana survived. So there are survivors, but not many in comparison to the death.
So did police or anybody step in to make action?
They tried the best they could. This is why This congressman was there. He was there
Right.
to investigate. And the
Right.
thing is like he was there a couple of days and everything was fine. Everything was going well. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until the people tried to leave was when it happened. Was when all of this happened.
Mm.
Because I don't know if Jim Jones would have done it otherwise. I think a lot of the drills that he was doing was mind control.
Right.
He was a sick man, don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah,
Very,
100%.
very sick man.
For
But
somebody to do, yeah, you're a psychotic man to
yes,
even think like that, even do something like that towards people. Um, yeah, just yeah, I can't.
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. But I just don't know if he actually would have done it otherwise. But I think
Uh-huh.
with people leaving or attempting to leave,
Mm.
he could see the cracks in that they're gonna say stuff. They're gonna say how bad this actually is, and I'm
Mhm.
gonna go to prison. So I think
Hmm.
that's why.
Well, I think a lot of the followers should be going to prison. It doesn't matter. For me, I don't know.
I
Maybe.
wouldn't say the followers. I would say the followers who are doing similar things to what he's doing, like his wife. I feel like I think he had another wife too. Like he got himself another wife or whatever. Like they could be potentially a part of this. Like they could have gone to prison.
Yeah.
Like someone who's just following the cult. I think they're
Yeah.
not doing anything wrong.
So, we're the wives, like I would say assistant leaders or like
In a sense.
co-leaders of
In a
the.
sense, yeah. There was
Okay.
probably like rankings and he was the top and then, he
Right.
had other
And they
people
were
underneath
the.
him.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those guys should be like in jail, and I feel like,
Well, they're dead.
oh, they're dead.
Like
Oh.
his wife is dead. Yeah, their wives are dead. Any of the
Okay.
higher ups are dead. They're
Okay.
dead. Yeah.
Interesting.
Most of the leaders, sorry, most of the just everybody part of those cults. Most
Mm-hmm.
of them who did go to Jonestown, which was most of them,
Mm-hmm.
they're dead.
Hmm. Yeah. Well.
They all died that day.
Well. Well. I hope they rot in hell.
I hope Jim Jones is rotten in the pits of hell. Jeez.
Oh, the devil. Yeah.
But
With
so
Hitler. Yeah.
oh, don't get me started with Hitler. Um, so officials later discovered just a cache of firearms, hundreds of passports stacked together, $500,000 in U.S. currency, which is a huge amount of money in today's day. It's probably millions
Yeah.
at this point. Millions more had reportedly been deposited into bank accounts overseas. The People's Temple effectively disbanded after the incident and declared bankruptcy at the end of 1978. So whoever else was around. So only one man, Temple member Larry Layton.
Mm-hmm.
So here you are, Mikel, was tried in the United States for his involvement in the November 18 events. It's only one. He was found guilty of
Only one?
only one.
Is it
Only
follower
one.
or?
He was a follower. He was the only
Oh.
one that was tried in any way in the States.
Is go ahead.
He was found guilty of conspiracy in aiding and abetting in the murder of Ryan and the
Yeah.
attempted murder of U.S. Embassy official Richard Dwyer and was sentenced to life in prison, though he was released in 2002. I
Huh.
don't know if he's alive or not, but just,
Wow.
Another man, Charles Bakeman, pleaded guilty to the attempted murder of a young girl and served a 5-year prison term in Guyana. So I think this was unrelated to the cult.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Okay. Hmm. Interesting.
Right. So we're gonna leave the 70s now. So yeah, sorry guys, I will not be talking about the family, the Charles Manson. I'm
Hmm.
not talking about them.
I think didn't you talk about them on the early episode?
I think briefly I probably would have, because I
Yeah.
probably mentioned Sharon Tate, which was one of the victims, but
Hmm.
I haven't talked about them in depth, and
Right.
honestly, I don't want to.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
I
that's okay.
think, yeah, I think unfortunately with the death of Sharon Tate, her being pregnant,
Hmm.
it's too much. But
Okay.
we're gonna leave the 70s and we're gonna
Okay.
fast forward to the 90s with
Right.
the Branch Davidian cult. Have you heard the Branch Davidian?
No, I
Okay,
haven't heard
we're
about
gonna
that either.
we're gonna
Well,
learn.
I heard about Jim Jones. Yeah, but
Yeah.
this one, no.
Okay. So just the preface for those people who have heard of Branch Davidian or whatever, or don't know the details of it, there is a really good documentary on Netflix. Again, can't remember what it's called because I watched it a while ago. But again, if you probably just type in Branch
Wait,
Davidian or Koresh or what,
hold on. Is this the a? Is it? No offense to
huh?
anybody. Is this the Asian guy that?
No,
No. Okay.
no Asians involved here.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, no.
I well, I saw
Asian
one.
guy who, I know there's definitely Asian
Let me just
based cults, but I don't.
go on.
Okay.
I'm gonna search on Netflix.
Okay, so Branch Davidian, member of an offshoot group of the Davidian Seventh day Adventist Church. This cult made headlines on February 28th, 1993, when its Mount Carmel headquarters near Waco, Texas, was raided by the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF. 4 federal agents were killed in the assault. A lengthy standoff, and when I mean lengthy, I mean lengthy, standoff between the group and government agents then followed. It ended on April 19th after some 80 members of the group, including their leader, David Koresh, died when the Mount Carmel complex was burned to the ground following an attempted entrance by Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI.
Hmm.
So, let's go into the history of them now. So, the Branch
Yeah.
Davidians are one of several groups that continued the work of Victor Herteff, who was born in 1885 and died in 1955, who was a Bulgarian immigrant to the United States and was a Seventh-day Adventist layman who in a set of tracts entitled Shepherd's Rod, and it was called for reform to the, so I'm going to continue saying SDA for Seventh-day Adventist Church. So he's basically like the leader of the SDA church, and he is the reason that it originally was a cult. It's not now. No disrespect to anyone who's Seventh-day Adventist. My ex-husband is one. No disrespect to that. But it was seen as a cult initially. So, having been rebuffed by Adventist leaders, Herteff and his original followers settled near Waco in 1935 and began to prepare for what they believed was the imminent return of Jesus, complaining that the Adventists had abandoned this task in favor of worldly pursuits. They lived a simple life and avoided most commercial forms of entertainment. Herteff, as mentioned, died in 1955 and was succeeded by his wife, Florence. She not only continued his attempts to discern the signs of the end time, but also set April 22nd, 1959 as the date of the dawn of the new Messianic age. So beginning in March 1959, hundreds of believers gathered at the Texas Center. So this is where they thought the world would end, I guess, I don't know. Where they were just gathering with each other while we waited for the world to end. The failure of the prediction led to the splintering of the movement into several factions. So in 1962, Florence announced that she had disbanded her following, and sold Mount Carmel, which is going to obviously be important throughout this story. So one of the factions opposed to Florence's leadership was led by someone by the name of Ben Rodden, who had previously called the Davidians to, quote, get off the dead rod, led by Florence herself, and move to the living branch. That's what he said.
Wow.
So Rodden gained control of Mount Carmel and established the General Association of Davidian Seventh-day Adventists. He called his members to a pure life and promised that Christ would return soon after the members reached a state of moral maturity. Don't know what that means. When Rodden died in 1978, members were torn between allegiance to his wife, Lois, and his son, George. Lois found an ally in a young convert, Vernon Howell, that's his name. But her death in 1986 left George in control. Within a year, however, Howell had asserted his leadership and became the head of the Mount Carmel community. So let's learn a little bit more about Howell. Howell moved quickly to assert his spiritual authority, and one of his first acts was the adoption of a new name, David Koresh, as I've mentioned earlier. This name suggested that he was a spiritual heir of the biblical King David, and that he, like Koresh, which is Hebrew for Cyrus, the ancient Persian king, was a messianic figure, though not the Messiah.
Right.
Which Messiah, obviously, for those who don't know, is Jesus. So Cyrus, just in case no one, because I didn't know this, Cyrus is the only non-Jew to whom the title Messiah or Anointed One is given in Scripture. So Koresh exercised his new authority by taking several, quote, spiritual wives from among the group's unmarried members. More on that in a minute. And in 1989, he asserted that he was the perfect mate for all female members because, narcissists think they're God's gift. So that's what he said, and confided to the Davidians his intention to create a new lineage of children who he believed would eventually rule the world. So what I want to say too, because I'm not sure if it says it here, David Koresh was also involved with underage girls. He was a sick fuck. In many ways.
Wouldn't be surprised if he's...
I'd be surprised if he wasn't, because that just seems to be the cool leader thing to do. Let's get involved with kids. Because why not? God. Yeah. Anyway. So because several of Koresh's spiritual wives were teenagers, the community was accused of child abuse by a former member and an anti-cult activist. Those allegations were aired in a 1992 trial in which an ex-member sought custody of his daughter, which was probably one of Koresh's wives. Coupled with Koresh's launching of a retail gun business, great, because we're in Texas, everybody, those child abuse charges began to attract the attention of legal authorities. Investigators, unsophisticated in the apocalyptic language of the Bible adopted by the group, also worried that the Branch Davidians might attack their neighbors or even Waco while fulfilling an imagined end time, which I think is pretty reasonable, honestly. Early in 1993, ATF agents in Texas requested a search warrant for Mount Carmel, but decided to make a surprise forced entry rather than serve the warrant. Here's the fucking problem. If it's gonna be a secret, make sure no one else knows. I won't say it yet, just in case it's in this. But if it's not, I'll save it for the end. But anyways, following the ill-fated ATF raid in February 1993 and subsequent FBI raid and fire 2 months later that destroyed Mount Carmel, extensive internal investigations were conducted by the ATF and the FBI, followed by public hearings by both the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate. The agency reports and hearings sought to place blame for the deaths, and several agents were disciplined for improper actions, which, yeah. In August of 1999, the U.S. government admitted that federal agents had indeed fired flammable material into or near the Branch Davidian compound prior to the massive fire. So they're partially to blame for this. The U.S. Attorney General then called for another investigation and a new set of hearings on the case that would be headed by Special Counsel John Danforth, who was a former U.S. Senator. In July 2000, Danforth issued a preliminary report that absolved the U.S. government of any wrongdoing in its encounter with the Branch Davidians, which I don't particularly agree with, but that's me. A few survivors of the raid were tried in court. They were found not guilty of the murder of the ATF agents, because remember, there were ATF agents that were killed initially.
So not guilty for the
Not guilty for the murder of the ATF agents, but received lengthy jail sentences for their actions during and after the raid. The remaining survivors, which was about 25 people, reorganized, published the writing of Koresh, and began the process of rebuilding the movement. By the end of the 1990s, it had more than doubled in size, though no clear leadership had emerged.
Wow.
So, other Davidian groups. The Branch Davidians are only one of the surviving Davidian groups. Others include the Davidian Seventh-day Adventist Association, headquartered in Exeter, Missouri, and the General Association of Davidian Seventh-day Adventists in Salem, South Carolina. But both groups were reorganized in the early 1960s to continue what they saw as the original teachings of the Davidian SDAs. Neither of them had a connection to Koresh or the Branch Davidians. So we can at least be happy with that. Right. So the one thing I wanted to mention here, because like I said, if you're going to do something like, surprise, we're here to suck shit up, do it in a way that no one finds out. The Branch Davidians were tipped off that they were coming. And that's why it started the way it did and then ultimately ended the way it did. They somehow, a reporter found out, or reporters found out that this was going to be happening. And they go into town, they're lost, they can't find Mount Carmel. They ask someone, hey, can you direct me to Mount Carmel? And this person said, well, why are you looking? And said, well, there's going to be a raid. The ATF is coming to raid Mount Carmel. We got to be there. He said this to a Branch Davidian. You're in a town where potentially someone could be a cult member. So what happened? That person went back to Koresh and said, we're getting raided anytime now. They were tipped off.
So they had a mole in their
They didn't have a mole. They got tipped off.
Okay.
Yeah, because the reporter blabbed and told the wrong person. And that is what happened. Things could have gone very differently if it wasn't for that. People could be alive on both sides. But anyway, that's it for the Branch Davidians. So let's fast forward some more to mid, around 2010-ish, around there. Nexium. Have you heard of Nexium?
Nope, never heard that one either. Okay. Sorry, guys.
Okay. For anyone who hasn't heard of Nexium and wants to hear more, The Vow on HBO Max, or Max, whatever it's called nowadays, or here in Canada, Crave, is a great watch. There's 2 seasons. I haven't seen the second season, but the first season is amazing, or as amazing as it can be. So definitely you can get more information from there. But let's get into it. So Nexium was a cult led by now convicted racketeer and sex offender Keith Raniere. NXIVM is also the name of the defunct corporation that Raniere founded, which provided seminars in the field of human potential development and served as a front organization for criminal activity by Raniere and his close associates, which we will talk about probably at some point. The Department of Justice seized ownership of NXIVM-related entities and their intellectual property through asset forfeit following Raniere's conviction. So, the NXIVM Corporation was based in the New York Capital District and had centers throughout the United States, Canada, and Mexico. The subsidiary companies of NXIVM recruited based on the multi-level marketing, MLM, model and used curricula-based. It started as an MLM and then it went so far left.
Yeah, pyramid scheme and then it went to a cult.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So, it had curricula based on the intellectual property of Raniere called Rational Inquiry. Courses attracted a variety of notable students, including actors, as well as the children of the rich and powerful. At its height, NXIVM had 700 active members.
Wow.
Yep. Over its existence, former members and the families of NXIVM clients, alarmed by Raniere's behavior and NXIVM's practices.
Sorry, going back, rewind.
Yep.
Is that like the most for like cults, or is it that's just like,
It's a decent number.
Decent number. Okay.
That's not the most. No.
Not the most. Okay, yeah, I feel like that's not the most. Yeah, because usually it's around
Jonestown had
thousands.
900 people.
Oh, okay.
Died in that, right? So no, it's not the most, but it's a decent amount.
Decent amount. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
So over its existence, former members and families of the NXIVM clients, alarmed by Raniere's behavior and NXIVM's practices, spoke to investigative journalists of Forbes, Vanity Fair, the New York Observer, and the Times Union of Albany, describing the organization as a cult. So just to preface here, Albany is very important because that's where its headquarters was in Albany, New York. So the organization was criticized in similar terms of Rick Allen Ross, Rick Allen Ross of the Cult Education Institute, an activist in academics. He's my favorite person, Rick Allen Ross. He is incredible. It's very difficult nowadays to not see a cult documentary and him not be, but he's incredible. Anyway,
he's a host of the.
He's not a host. He works in deprogramming.
Okay.
People who have been in cults.
Okay.
And he works. He does he's done all research on cults and activities and behaviors and all that.
Well, that's good. So he's doing good work. And
he is.
Okay.
So following the New York Times expose that came out about them, the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York investigated the organization and in 2018 brought criminal charges against Raniere, co-founder Nancy Saltzman, and her daughter Lauren, actress Allison Mack. Now, if you don't know who Allison Mack is, she was in Smallville. Seagram heiress Claire Bonfman, and bookkeeper Kathy Russell. So there's a few people here. The U.S. Attorney's Office argued in its Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act prosecution that NXIVM and its subsidiaries existed to promote, enhance, and protect Raniere and members of the enterprise. And if it's not talked about here, I will talk about it because I think it's important. The indictment alleges that Raniere and his co-defendants comprised an organized racketeering enterprise by recruiting others into NXIVM and DOS. For those who don't know what DOS is, I can't remember what it's an acronym. I can't remember what it stands for. but it's basically the sex cult side of this.
Oh, okay.
Um, so for financial and personal benefits and committed crimes ranging from sex trafficking to forced labor and visa and wire fraud. All defendants except for Ranieri pled guilty. Because, of course, he is a narcissist. He doesn't think he did anything wrong. So,
Interesting.
yeah. Ranieri chose to go to trial in 2019. Prosecutors revealed a decades-long pattern of grooming, sexual abuse of girls and women. He was R-wording these people. Physical and psychological punishments against the dissenters, and hacking and vexatious litigation against enemies, which they definitely did. Ranieri was convicted on the top charge of racketeering and racketeering conspiracy, as well as several other charges. Judge Nicholas Garofis sentenced Ranieri to a whopping 120 years. So he's dying in there. Co-conspirators Claire Bothman, Nancy Saltzman, and Allison Mack were given lesser prison sentences. Lawrence Saltzman and Kathy Russell were each given non-prison sentences.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know why, or why they didn't get any?
I'm trying to remember if they just didn't have enough evidence to, because the bigger people in this, they got Keith Raniere, obviously. Nancy Saltzman was right alongside with him on a lot of this. Allison Mack was a part of DOS, and so I'll explain that in a minute. So it will help you make sense of why they were going after Allison Mack.
Did you think that they were talking, cooperating with the police on that's why they got less? Doubtful? Really?
Especially with the positions that they were in. They maybe didn't fight necessarily, but I don't think they would have helped their case against Keith Raniere either, if that makes sense. They were not much better than him. The difference with him is he's the ringleader. Right. So following Raniere's conviction, he continued to direct a small set of loyal members from his prison cell, very similarly to what's his name? Warren's? That's his name? The guy on the LDS. I've completely wiped him out of my brain at them. The Keep Sweet guy, him. So very similar to him. And he encourages and continues recruitment for NXIVM. At his direction, members of the group danced outside Raniere's jail and staged protests against individual prosecutors. Based on statements of support, it was estimated that about 50 to 60 people remain loyal to him.
50 to 60 people remain loyal? Wow.
Agreed. So we can go into a little bit of the structure of NXIVM. During NXIVM seminars, students would call Raniere and Saltzman Vanguard and Prefect, respectively. The Hollywood Reporter wrote that Raniere adopted the title from the 1981 video game Vanguard, in which the destruction of one's enemies increased one's own power. That's what Vanguard means. Within the organization, the reasoning of his titles was that Raniere was the leader of the physiological movement and Saltzman was his first student. By 2003, 3,700 people had taken part in ESP classes. So this is the way to get people in. This was the start place with the ESP classes. Reported participants included businesswoman Sheila Johnson, former Surgeon General Antonia Novello, Enron executive Stephen Cooper, Anna Cristina Fox, who is the daughter of former Mexican President Vicente Fox, Entrepreneur Richard Branson. Isn't he a big guy, Richard Branson? I'm
Richard
seeing his face.
Branson.
Can you Google him for
Richard.
me, please? 'Cause I think
Richard.
I'm seeing him in my head right now. Who denied having taken any of these classes was Richard Branson. Who said that? Businessman Edgar Bronfman Sr., who was probably the father of the daughter who was also in trouble with all of this, and actresses Linda Evans, Grace Park, who I believe is the actress who was on Million Little Things, and Nikki Klein. In the early 2000s, Seagram heiresses Claire and Sarah Brofman, daughters of Edgar, as I said, became attached to the organization. So,
Richard Branson.
yeah,
Is
like
he?
he's like blonde haired guy. I'm thinking
Yes, it is. Yeah,
long
that's
hair,
him.
brown. Yeah,
Brown hair with a goatee.
that's him.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's him. So, if we're curious to know, kind of from the Canadian perspective, how this cult seems to infiltrate.
Yeah, I was about to
Canada.
ask about the Canadian, because like I don't hear a lot of the cult
Oh, we
stuff
have cults here.
Oh, we have cults.
We
Okay.
definitely have cults here. Probably still do.
Okay.
But so basically how the recruitment happened in Vancouver. After actress Kristen Kruk became involved with Nexium in 2006, Saltzman and her daughter Lauren, as we've mentioned, was a part of this. She was a junior Nexium leader. Went to Vancouver to recruit Kruk's Smallville co-star Allison Mack. Lauren bonded with Mack. The two women eventually became Ranieri's inner circle and his sexual partners.
All right.
Kruk, however, left Nexium in 2013. Mack became an enthusiastic member of this for Nexium, persuading her parents to take courses, and after wrapping production of Smallville in 2011, moved to Clifton Park, New York to be near Nexium's home base, as mentioned, in Albany. So that's kind of how it started. And to be here. So, just so we can kind of talk about the different organizations within Nexium. Nexium has been associated with several related organizations. Jeunesse, with a society aimed at women, while the Society of Protectors was aimed primarily at men, because women can't protect anybody, I guess. A third group was known by the acronym DOS, as I've mentioned, which is short for Dominus Obscurus Sornorum, short, which according to one member means master over slave women.
Wow.
So just to kind of talk about DOS for a second, because this is kind of the thing that really trapped them. So DOS was something that was kind of like, so you have like an umbrella, and the umbrella is DOS. And it was basically, you would have a master and a slave. So let's pretend you're Mac. Allison Mack is a master for someone else, and they would have to do everything that was said by them.
Yeah.
Everything. They would also get collateral, which could be anything, down to inappropriate photographs, deep dark secrets, could be anything. And this would be used in order to ensure that the members of DOS wouldn't blab. And all of that was sent back to Keith Raniere when they were told it wouldn't. That's very important. But then within DOS, there was this other section of it, which I cannot remember the name of. Maybe it's here, but there was another section of that, I believe. Could be wrong. Maybe DOS was all of this. I don't remember. But then what they would do is this was the sex cult aspect of things. And when you knew you were in weird territory was when you would be branded. They would brand the women in this group.
Mm.
And the branding was later revealed, was later figured out that it had a K and an A kind of mixed in with the design of its branding, which stood for Keith and Allison. Or I think it was an R, it might have been an R and an M, and it was Raniere Mac, but either way, it had their initial of some sort on the branding. And these women, and it would be branded in like the bikini area. So chances are, like, anytime you look down at that, you're gonna see it. You can't get rid of that. So yeah. So there's another one in 2006. Raniere founded Rainbow Culture Garden, an international chain of childcare organizations in which children were to be exposed to 7 different languages. In 2014, Raniere founded the Nexium-affiliated news organization, The Knife of Aristotle, to identify and measure media biases. So, yeah, I mean, we could talk forever about the rest of, like, those kind of talk about, like, the exposure of DOS that's kind of just mentioned in the downfall of Nexium, because there's too much tied together with that, but it's a lot, it's so much. If you want to know more, you can definitely go and watch the series The Vow, which is absolutely, it's an insane documentary. It's well done. Yeah, I think for me with Nexium, it was kind of one of those cults that I'm just like, how does this still happen? How is this still happening? And the thing is we're always gonna have dangerous people like him in this world. And it's not just him. It's not now just Nexium. We also had the Mother God cults that I believe is still kind of going on, even though she's now dead. And I first heard of this cult before she had passed away. But if you want to know more about that, I'm not going to go in depth with that. There's also one on Mac's grave, if you want to watch that documentary as well. And then the latest thing now is Twin Flames. And I don't know if you've heard of Twin Flames, Mikel, but there's 2 different documentaries, Netflix, HBO. And it's insane to me because you have things like Twin Flames, where it's like there's nothing they're doing currently yet that's breaking the law. Eventually it might get there, but there's nothing they're doing right now that's breaking the law. But you have people being like, yeah, that's your twin flame. This ex-boyfriend is your twin flame, or this guy you met at the club one time is your twin flame. Someone who is probably transphobic is your twin flame, which, again, for people who don't know what twin flame means, kind of means like your other half or whatever.
Right.
And do whatever you gotta do to get them into your life. That could be stalking, constantly texting, calling, or whatever, getting restraining orders. That just means you're getting through to them. So keep going. And this is what these leaders are telling their followers to do. And you could literally Google twin flames, because twin flames is not a new thing that they created. It's something they took and warped. But twin flame, you could Google it, and chances are the first things you're going to get is them. So be very careful when Googling anything, really, because I think in this day and age we Google everything. So be very careful when Googling. But this is what they do. They have currently people, they're matching people, and their cult is primarily women. And in their cult, you have your defined feminine and your defined masculine. You can't be gay or a lesbian or anything else. That doesn't exist, because you have to be You have to have a feminine and a masculine in a relationship according to them. And then it turns to having people transitioning, women transitioning to be men, because someone has to be the feminine and someone has to be the masculine. These are the things that they're doing currently. And this is happening now. And in this day and age, too, with COVID, everything was recorded on a Zoom call. There's so much footage of their meetings because they were recorded. You can, it's insane. And this guy thinks he's Jesus. So it's,
I think you know what? I think I saw a little bit of it on Netflix.
Yeah, because it's
I just don't remember. I just don't remember bits and pieces. But like, yeah,
yeah.
Was he in like some type of sex cult as well with underage?
No, because he's not actually
okay.
having sex with anybody.
Yeah.
He wants you to go have sex with your twin flame. So he's not actually sleeping with anybody. He's only, sleeping with his wife.
Yeah.
But, they're currently creating a compound right now. Can't remember which state it's in. It's Michigan or Missouri, one of the M states. And they're creating a compound right now that eventually probably everyone's going to move to. And then God only knows what is going to happen once that does happen. And they're robbing people of money. People are being told to quit their jobs and make money for us.
Right.
So they are, all intents and purposes, a cult. But they're just not at the, unfortunately, something bad has to happen before something is done.
Which is terrible.
Which is terrible. It could be SA, it could be death of somebody, it could be,
and not one police or government is known about this type of situation that's going on.
Well, they know. Probably. It's hard to not know, especially in the state. And
you think so?
I do think they do know. I mean, again, detectives, police officers, the whole bit, they watch Netflix like everybody else. They're aware of what's going on. However, there's nothing that can be done currently because the twin flame cult is not technically committing a crime. Not yet, anyways.
Yeah, you said that before. Okay.
Right. So there's nothing that can be done. Everyone is entering into this cult on their own free will. So.
People.
But what I'm gonna say to end this off is basically, any one of us, me, you, could be dragged to a cult because they'll kind of like a fly to a spider's web, bring you into something because they are attracting you to something, right? Attracting you based on whatever it is that you're lacking in your life, whether it's the social aspect, the financial aspect, the wanting to be accepted.
Yeah.
They play on that. So we're all capable of being sucked in.
Trust me, I've been tried to get into like a lot of pyramid schemes. They're similar to like cults in my opinion.
Similar, but
it's not as violent. It's not as, but it's more mental in my opinion. Like they try to hit you financially because a
lot of us get stuck in pyramid schemes or MLMs or whatever. But just know that if you or someone you know is potentially being sucked into a cult, don't. It's hard because you want to say to them, what are you doing? But be patient with them. Love them. Keep them close to you as much as possible. And get the help that they need. There's going to be a lot of help that will be needed for them. And just know you're not alone. If you are one of those people who are in a cult and you know, shit, I'm in a cult, or I need to get the fuck out of this, or whatever, and you feel like you can't get out, or you feel like because you've cut ties with your families that they're not going to want to talk to you or they're not going to want to help you, trust me, they are going to be so happy to hear from you, and they will do anything, I'm sure, in their power to help you.
100%. Yeah.
So just know you're not alone. And
yeah, I agree 100% with that statement. So hopefully a lot of people can hear what you're saying.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Cults is a very scary thing, but
they are.
Yeah.
They're very scary. So this ends episode 36 of the Next Tape podcast. The Next Tape podcast is available now on all podcast platforms. We also have a website called solo.to/Next Tape podcast. Where else are we at, Tanyka?
We are on Facebook and Instagram at Next Take Podcast, and Twitter and TikTok at Next Take Pod.
And we also have an email. So contact us at mikeltanyka@gmail.com. So that is mikeltanyka@gmail.com. So we talked about quotes, a whole lot of quotes that are in the past and, in the present.
Currently, yeah.
Yeah, currently as well. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, quite a bit of a lot of dark stuff.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Anything you want to say, Tanyka, before we end this episode here?
I don't think so. I think I've said all I needed to say.
All right. So I'm Mikel, and
I'm Tanyka.
We are out until next week. Peace, guys.
Bye.